the towering glass headquarters of Harrington Industries was known as one of the most powerful companies in America. Every morning, hundreds of executives, engineers, lawyers, and investors filled its luxurious halls. But there was one person almost nobody noticed. His name was Jack Walker. Dressed in a simple gray janitor's uniform, Jack quietly pushed his cleaning cart through the building before sunrise, greeting everyone with a polite smile. Most employees barely acknowledged him. Some nodded politely, while others walked past as if he were invisible. Jack never complained. He simply continued his work with patience and discipline, qualities he had learned years earlier during a career he never spoke about. Hidden behind the humble uniform was a former Navy SEAL who had spent over 15 years serving his country in dangerous missions across the world. After losing his wife to illness, Jack left the military to raise his young son. When his son later passed away from a rare disease, Jack disappeared from public life, choosing a quiet existence where no one knew his past. Cleaning office floors was never about the paycheck. It gave him peace in a world that had taken everything he loved. At the very top of the company was billionaire CEO Victoria Harrington, one of the most successful businesswomen in the country. She had built her empire through intelligence and determination, but there was one challenge no amount of money could solve: her 10-year-old daughter, Emma. Since the tragic death of her father 2 years earlier, Emma had become withdrawn, angry, and impossible to control. The best teachers resigned after only weeks. Professional nannies quit one after another. Child psychologists tried for months without success. Emma refused to speak to almost everyone. She ignored instructions, broke expensive electronics in frustration, and often locked herself inside rooms for hours. Victoria loved her daughter deeply, but every attempt to help seemed to push Emma even further away. The mansion had become quiet, not because it was peaceful, but because everyone feared another emotional outburst. One rainy afternoon, Victoria had no choice but to bring Emma to the office while attending an emergency board meeting. She instructed her assistants to watch over the little girl inside the executive lounge. For the first hour, everything remained calm, but Emma suddenly slipped away while everyone was distracted preparing documents. Security guards searched every floor as panic spread through the building. Victoria immediately left the meeting, terrified that something had happened to her daughter. Employees checked conference rooms, cafeterias, and executive offices, but Emma was nowhere to be found. Finally, one security guard noticed a cleaning cart parked near the rooftop garden. Everyone rushed upstairs expecting the worst. Instead, they found Emma quietly sitting on a wooden bench beside Jack Walker. The little girl was holding a small paper airplane while Jack folded another one from an old cleaning checklist. For the first time in months, Emma was smiling. Not a forced smile, but a genuine laugh that echoed across the rooftop garden. Jack calmly launched the paper airplane into the air, and Emma laughed as it floated across the flowers. Victoria stopped walking. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Every expensive specialist had failed to make her daughter smile, yet the quiet janitor had done it in less than an hour without even trying. When Emma noticed her mother, she didn't run away or become angry. Instead, she looked up and said softly, "Mom, Mr. Jack knows how to make the airplanes fly farther than Dad used to." Victoria felt tears fill her eyes. For the first time since her husband's death, her daughter had spoken about her father without crying. Looking at the humble janitor standing quietly beside her child, Victoria realized she knew absolutely nothing about the man everyone in the company had ignored for years. Little did she know that Jack Walker's extraordinary past, and the reason he understood broken hearts so well, was about to change all of their lives forever. The following morning, the story of Emma laughing with the quiet janitor spread throughout Harrington Industries. Employees who had barely noticed Jack Walker for years suddenly found themselves wondering who he really was. Victoria Harrington couldn't stop thinking about what she had witnessed on the rooftop. Every expert she had hired had focused on fixing Emma's behavior, yet Jack had done something completely different. He had simply listened to her. Curious and grateful, Victoria invited Jack to her office. As he entered wearing the same simple gray janitor's uniform, he looked completely comfortable despite standing inside one of the most luxurious executive offices in the country. Victoria thanked him for helping, Emma and asked the question everyone wanted answered. "How did you do it?" Jack smiled politely before replying, "I didn't do anything special." She wasn't looking for someone to control her. She was looking for someone willing to understand why she was hurting. Victoria remained silent. Those words struck her, harder than any advice she had, received from child specialists. Jack continued gently. "Children often hide sadness behind anger because they don't know how to explain what's inside." Victoria lowered her eyes. For 2 years, she had buried herself in work, believing she was securing Emma's future, never realizing her daughter simply wanted her mother to be present. Over the next few days, Emma began searching the building for Jack every afternoon after school. Instead of spending time on her tablet or refusing to speak with adults, she quietly helped him water plants, feed the birds in the rooftop garden, and fold paper airplanes. Employees were amazed by the transformation. The little girl who once screamed at everyone now smiled whenever Jack was nearby. One afternoon, Emma asked him, "Mr. Jack, were you always a janitor?" Jack looked toward the city skyline and smiled softly. "No, a long time ago. I had a different job." Emma's eyes grew wide with curiosity. "What did you do?" Jack hesitated before answering. "I worked with a special team that protected people when they were in danger." Emma looked impressed. "Like a superhero?" Jack laughed quietly. "Something like that." Before he could say more, 2 men wearing expensive suits entered the garden. They weren't employees. Their serious expressions immediately caught Jack's attention. Years of military training had taught him to recognize danger before anyone else. One man reached inside his jacket while looking directly toward Emma. In a single instant, Jack's entire posture changed. The quiet janitor disappeared, replaced by the calm, alert warrior he had once been. Without hesitation, he stepped in front of Emma, gently pushing her behind a concrete pillar. The first man suddenly pulled out what appeared to be a weapon. Before anyone else could react, Jack moved with incredible speed. In one smooth motion, he disarmed the man, pinned him to the ground, and knocked the second attacker, unconscious before security. Guards even reached the rooftop. The entire confrontation lasted less than 10 seconds. By the time security arrived, both intruders were lying on the ground, unable to move. Jack calmly stepped back and helped Emma to her feet as though nothing unusual had happened. Security officers stared in complete disbelief. No ordinary janitor could have reacted with such precision. Victoria rushed onto the rooftop moments later after hearing emergency alarms. She found Emma safely hugging Jack while 2 armed men were being handcuffed by security officers. One of the guards looked at Victoria in disbelief and said, "Ma'am, if Mr. Walker hadn't acted when he did, your daughter could have been kidnapped." Victoria turned toward Jack, unable to hide her shock. "Who are you?" she whispered. Jack remained silent for a long moment before finally answering. "Before I became a janitor, I was a United States Navy SEAL." Every person on the rooftop stood speechless. The quiet man they had ignored for years wasn't just a janitor. He was a highly decorated special operations veteran whose courage had just saved the billionaire's daughter. But Jack knew something everyone else didn't. Those 2 men had not come alone, and the real danger was only beginning. The entire headquarters of Harrington Industries remained in shock after the attempted kidnapping. News of the incident spread quickly, but one detail amazed everyone even more than the attack itself. The quiet janitor had defeated 2 armed men in seconds and saved the billionaire's daughter without a single innocent person being hurt. Victoria Harrington sat in her office watching the security footage over and over again. Every movement Jack made was calm, controlled, and precise. There was no panic, no hesitation, only years of training and experience. She finally understood why Emma felt safe around him. It wasn't because Jack entertained her or bought her expensive gifts. It was because, for the first time since losing her father, Emma was with someone who made her feel completely protected. Later that evening, Victoria invited Jack to dinner at the Harrington mansion. As they sat together in the quiet dining room, she thanked him with tears in her eyes. "You didn't just save my daughter's life today," she said softly. "You gave me another chance to be her mother." Jack looked at Emma, who was happily drawing paper airplanes at the table, and smiled. "Children don't need perfect parents," he replied. They only need parents who show up. During dinner, Victoria asked Jack why someone with his extraordinary military background was working as a janitor. Jack remained quiet for a moment before answering. He explained that after years serving as a Navy SEAL, he had lost his wife to cancer. A few years later, he lost his young son to a rare illness. The grief had changed him forever. He left the military because he no longer wanted a life filled with violence. Working as a janitor gave him peace. Cleaning floors reminded him that no job was beneath a person with dignity, and helping others without seeking recognition gave his life new meaning. Victoria listened silently, realizing that the strongest man she had ever met carried the deepest scars. The following day, investigators confirmed that the kidnapping had been organized by a rival businessman hoping to force Victoria into giving up control of Harrington Industries. Thanks to Jack's courage and the evidence collected by security cameras, those responsible were arrested before they could hurt anyone else. Reporters quickly learned about the mysterious janitor who had saved the billionaire's daughter. But Jack refused every interview. "The story shouldn't be about me," he said. "It should be about making sure children are safe." Several weeks later, Harrington Industries held its annual leadership celebration. Instead of honoring record profits or successful investments, Victoria stood before thousands of employees and invited Jack Walker onto the stage. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Many employees remembered walking past the quiet janitor every day, without even saying hello. Victoria smiled proudly as she presented Jack with the company's highest civilian honor and announced the creation of the Walker Foundation, a program dedicated to supporting military veterans, widowed parents, and children who had lost loved ones. Jack accepted the award with his usual humility. Looking across the audience, he said, "Titles don't define character. Whether you wear a business suit, a military uniform, or a janitor's uniform, every person deserves respect. The greatest mission of my life was never serving on the battlefield. It was learning how to help people heal." After the battle was over, Emma ran onto the stage and hugged him tightly, smiling brighter than anyone had seen in years. From that day forward, Jack was no longer known simply as the janitor who saved a billionaire's daughter. He became the man who reminded an entire company and eventually the whole country that true heroes rarely seek attention. They quietly serve others, protect the vulnerable, and lead through kindness rather than power. For Jack Walker, that would always be the greatest victory of all. Story lesson: true heroes are recognized by their character, not their job title. Kindness, courage, and humility leave a greater legacy than wealth or power. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones carrying the deepest scars while quietly protecting others.